Welcome back to video lectures on operating system subject. Dear students, today we shall continue the topic Introduction to Operating System. So today we shall begin with storage management. We know that in the computer system, the program data and the information will be permanently stored in the secondary storage devices like a disk drive and tape drive. So operating system is basically providing uniform and logical view of information storage. Basically, the data or information will be stored in the form of file. The file can be defined as the collection of related data. The operating system is basically storing the data in the form of file, which are kept permanently in the secondary storage devices. It includes disk drives and tape drives. The properties of the secondary storage devices include access speed, its capacity, data transfer rate, and access method, that is sequential or random. Access speed basically deciding the speed at which the data is transferred to or from secondary storage devices. Capacity basically how much amount of data we can store in the disk or tape, so that is called as capacity. Data transfer rate, how much amount of data we can transfer per unit time, that is called as data transfer rate. The speed of the devices will be measured in terms of data transfer rate. So that is how much amount of bytes we can transfer per unit time, that is called as data transfer rate. Access method. So the disk or device is supporting which type of data access. So basically there are two types: sequential, random access. Sequential access basically includes accessing data sequentially in a contiguous manner, block by block, from beginning to end. And the random access is basically accessing a block of data randomly from any location from the disk. So that is called as random access. So if you take any storage medium or any device, we need to consider its access speed, capacity, data transfer rate, and access method. The next one is file management system. Every operating system is basically consisting of a file management system. So this is one of the visible component of an operating system. File management basically, or file system basically providing organization of the files. That is how the files are organized in the system will be decided by a file management system. So in the file system, files are organized into directories. So directory is nothing but it's a folder which consisting of files, or even it may including subdirectories. And there will be some access control defined by the system to determine who can access what. So to access files which are stored in the directory, there will be some access permission set for the users. So there are different kinds of users, like owner of the file, then group user, and all other users. Who is owner? Owner is a user who has actually created the file, and for the owner there will be some different set of access permissions set. The access permissions basically will be defined like read access right, read access permission, write access permission, and execute access permission. So there will be different access permissions set for the owner. So similarly, in the Unix system there is something called as group user. So the access permission set to some group of users. So that is called as group user permissions. And what are the permissions set for all other users? That is called as others. So like this, in the Unix system, we set access permissions for three different kind of users. That is owner, group user, and all other users, or all other public users. With respect to file system management, the operating system activities include: first one, creating and deleting files and directories. So directory is also one kind of file. For example, if you take Unix, there are commands like mkdir, so that is used to create a new directory, and rmdir, that is used to delete a directory. We know that a directory may be containing files or subdirectories. Uh, a new file can be created or existing file can be deleted from the directory. So one of the important activity in the file system is creating and deleting files and directories. Second, primitives to manipulate files and directories. So that is there are some system calls provided by the operating system which can be used to manipulate files and directories. It includes reading contents of the file, writing contents to the file, making modifications of the files, deleting files. So these are the common operations performed with respect to files and directories. So before we can write or read the contents of the file must be opened. So there are some system calls provided by the operating system to manipulate the files including directories. The next one is mapping files onto secondary storage. Ultimately, the files has to be kept in the secondary storage devices permanently. So file system is basically providing logical organization of the files, but actually those files has to be mapped onto the secondary storage devices. So the mapping should be done by the operating system itself. The next operation is backup files onto stable storage media like non-volatile storage devices like tape drive. So operating system has to maintain a backup of the file in the devices like tape drive, which is non-volatile devices. So the backup of the file must be maintained by the operating systems. The next topic is the mass storage management. Usually disk drives are used to store the data that doesn't fit into main memory. We know that main memory capacity is very limited. We cannot store the larger files into the main memory. Hence, we need to store the data or files which does not fit into main memory into the secondary storage disk. Or if we want to keep the data for a longer period of time permanently, then we need to use the disk for storing the data and the files. But the thing is that whatever the data or files we are storing in the disk, they must be properly managed. And the speed of computer operation depends on the number of criteria, includes the speed of the disk and disk scheduling algorithms. So with respect to mass storage management, operating system activities include free space management. So there will be operations carried out in the disk, that is allocation of the space to the files and deallocation of the space to the files. So once a file is deleted from the file system, and whatever the memory allocated to that particular file will be freed. So there must be some mechanism exist in the operating system which can manage the free space. So that is called as free space management. Next one is storage allocation. If you want to store a new file into the disk, the required amount of storage we need to provide. So the operating system must be providing a mechanism for allocating a memory space for the new files and data. So that is called as storage allocation. So there will be different storage allocation strategies the operating system has to adopt here. The third one is disk scheduling. So there are some disk scheduling algorithms adopted here to allocate the memory blocks to the files and data. And some of the storages need not to be fast. So we talked about the secondary storage. So there is one more kind of device we can consider in the system, that is called as ternary storage. It includes optical storage and magnetic tape. So there is some data or program or any file, so that you want to keep in the storage as a backup. so they are not used frequently. So the data or the file which is not used frequently can be stored permanently in the ternary storage devices like optical storage and magnetic tape, and even it will be managed by operating systems and applications. So there are some variations in the ternary storage devices like write once, read many times. Usually storage will be, that is data will be stored once, but it can be read any number of times. So that is write one, read many times. And another type is read write. So any number of times we can read and write. Now let us look at performance of various levels of storage devices. So there are basically 4 different levels of storage devices we find in computer system, that is level 1, level 2, level 3 and level 4. So level 1, at level 1 we will have the register. So registers are part of CPU, they are native to the CPU. So CPU can directly interact with the registers. So that is level 1. And level 2 device will be the cache memory. So cache memory is a memory, so that is exists between CPU and the main memory. So the third level is main memory. It is also called as physical memory or primary memory. And level 4 is disk storage. Here register, cache and main memory are volatile memory. So they will hold the information temporarily as long as power is on. Whereas the disk storage is non-volatile memory where the data will be residing permanently. So let us compare these different levels of storage devices with respect to their size, implementation technology, access time, bandwidth, and who is going to manage these, and backed by. Here the access time is measured in terms of nanosecond, the time required to access a block of data from the device. So that is called as access time. It is measured in terms of nanosecond. Bandwidth, so that is amount of data transferred per unit time, that is called as bandwidth. It is measured in terms of megabytes per second. So how much amount of megabytes of data we can transfer per second, that is called as bandwidth. So let us take the register. So the size of register will be less than 1 kilobyte. They are very fast as compared to all other memory. They are part of CPU itself. The size of registers will be very less. It is in terms of KB. In fact, it is less than 1 KB. The implementation technologies for registers is CMOS. The technology used in the registers is CMOS technology. The access time of the registers in nanosecond is ranging between 0.25 nanoseconds to 0.5 nanoseconds. The bandwidth, that is the data transfer rate, is very high, that is 20,000 to 1 lakh megabytes per second. So that is the bandwidth we'll have in the registers, and it will be managed by compiler. Compiler is going to store the data into registers directly, and it is backed by cache. The next memory that we use to register is cache memory, that is called as backed by. So now let us look at the second level of the storage that comes after registers is cache memory. The size of cache memory, it will be greater than 16 MB. So the capacity of cache memory is more than registers, but the speed will be less as compared to register, but it is having more size. The technology used here is CMOS SRAM. So that is the static RAM is basically used as a cache memory. We know that static memory doesn't require any refreshing. So that is the rewriting of the data is not required in case of static RAM. Static RAMs are faster as compared to dynamic RAM. So static RAM can be used as a cache memory. The access time is Access time is more as compared to register. It will be ranging from 0.5 nanosecond to 25 nanosecond. Bandwidth is 5000 to 10,000 megabytes per second. It is bit low as compared to register, and it is managed by hardware directly, and cache memory is followed by main memory. After cache we will have the main memory. It is also called as primary memory or physical memory. The size of main memory will be in terms of gigabytes. It is usually the memory having a size of 16 gigabytes. The technology used for main memories are dynamic RAM. We know the dynamic RAM is requiring refreshing, that is at regular intervals we need to rewrite the contents of DRAM, because DRAMs are losing data frequently. So that is why the same contents we need to rewrite, that is called as refreshing. So dynamic RAMs requires refreshing, hence they are slower as compared to static RAM, but they are cheaper as compared to static RAM. Static RAMs are costlier, that is cache memory is costlier than main memory, which is using dynamic RAMs. The access time is more as compared to cache memory. It will be ranging from 80 nanoseconds to 250 nanoseconds. Data transfer rate is less as compared to cache memory. It is 1000 to 5000 megabytes per second, and it is managed by operating system itself. And the main memory is followed by disk. That is level 4 is disk storage, so which is providing permanent storage for the files and data. The size of disk will be in terms of 100 to 100 gigabytes to 1 terabytes. The technology used here is magnetic disk. Access time is 5000 nanosecond. It is much slower as compared to all other levels of devices. Bandwidth is also very less, that is 20 to 150 megabytes per second, and it is managed by operating system, and it is backed by CD or tape. So the next level of device that is called as Turner device, which is made up of optical disc or tape drives. So now let us see the migration of an integer value a from disk to register. We know that the data is permanently stored in the magnetic disk, and during execution of the program instruction or data has to be transferred from disk to the CPU. How the data movement will take place from disk to the CPU, let us see here. It's shown in the diagram here. For example, an integer a you want to migrate from disk to the register. Now let us see how it will be done here. So an integer value a will be permanently stored in the magnetic disk, and if it is required by the program during execution, the data will be transferred from magnetic disk to the main memory, then from main memory to the cache memory, then cache memory to the CPU register, and CPU is going to take that value from register directly. Now let us look at input-output subsystem. Here, in short, it is called as I/O subsystem. I/O subsystem is responsible for many things. First one, memory management of I/O, including buffering. So what is buffering? Storing data temporarily while it is being transferred. For example, if we take input devices like keyboard, every input or output device will be containing a buffer where the data is stored permanently. If you take input device keyboard, whatever the input we give from keyboard, it will be temporarily stored in the buffer that is called as the device buffer. And similarly for the output devices like monitor, whatever data you want to display on the monitor, it will be temporarily stored in the buffer that is associated with the monitor device. So every I/O device will be maintaining its own buffer that is called as device buffer, where data is temporarily stored. The second one is caching. So before the data is transferred, so caching will be done. For example, if you take the input device like keyboard, so whatever the data we have inputted, it will be there in the buffer. Then it is transferred to the cache memory, and the CPU takes the data from the cache memory. And same thing will happen for output devices. The next one is spooling. So it is basically the overlapping of output of one job with input of other jobs. Output of one job may be used as input to the next job or other job. So that is called as spooling. And generally there is a device driver interface. We know that device driver is a software program which is responsible for all the operations with respect to the devices. And device drivers are specific to the hardware devices. Usually device drivers are provided by the hardware vendors. The next topic is protection and security. What is protection? That is contents of one process should be protected from another process. That is, a particular process cannot access the contents of another process. So that kind of protection we need to provide here. Even you know that in the system there will be two kinds of processes, kernel process and user process. Here user process cannot access the contents of kernel process. It cannot interfere into the kernel process. So one kind of security is required here. So that is what is protection. The second one is security. It is defense of the system against internal and external attacks, including denial of service attack, worms, viruses, identity theft, and theft of services. So we need to provide the security against all these attacks. And systems generally distinguish among users to determine who can do what. As I already explained, in the operating system there will be different kinds of users, and users are identified by a unique number that is called as user ID, and it is also called as security ID. And user ID is associated with all the files, processes, and also there is something called a group identifier. That is a set of users belonging to particular group will be assigned with the ID that is called as group ID. So there will be some access permissions set to a particular group of users. So that is assigned with the ID that is called as group ID. The next topic I'll be teaching is distributed computing. In the distributed computing, what we can do is the number of computer systems can be integrated to have more computation power and storage. So that is called as distributed computing. Here the number of computer systems are interconnected through a network. We know that network is basically providing a communication paths. So there are different kinds of networks like local area network, wide area network, and metropolitan network. We call them as LAN, WAN, and MAN in short. In case of distributed computing, the number of computer systems have been integrated through network. Here our main purpose is to have the larger computation capability. That is the computation capability of a computer systems can be combined to have the larger computation power and also the storage. And basically the distributed computing providing the communication which allows systems to exchange messages and data. The data sharing will be possible in case of distributed computing. Now let us look at special purpose systems. So basically you will find two different types of systems. One is general purpose, second one is special purpose. The general purpose systems are used for different purposes. like our personal computer is used for different purposes, that is called a general purpose system. But special purpose systems are meant for a specific purpose. These include real-time embedded systems. So if you take the home appliances like refrigerator, washing machine, microwave, oven, and even automobiles like cars, where you'll find the real-time embedded systems, they'll be performing a specific kind of operations meant to control a specific kind of device or a system. So these are called as real-time embedded systems. So for real-time embedded systems, there is no user interface exists here because usually user is not interacting with the real-time embedded systems. They are self-driven automated systems, and they execute some limited set of instructions, and usually the operating system that is running the real-time embedded systems will be real-time operating system. So real-time operating system has a strict time constraint. It means a specific set of instructions must be executed within a specific time. So it is called as a real-time operating system. So the real-time operating system is very small, compact, and there is no chance for failure. The real-time operating system or embedded system, usually they never fail. The next one is multimedia systems. Usually the systems will be processing text data, but in the modern era, the computer systems must be processing multimedia contents today. Multimedia includes the data such as image, photo, audio, video, along with the text. So that is called as multimedia data. The system which is capable of handling multimedia data is called as multimedia system. The next one is handheld systems. So handheld systems are very compact computer systems. This includes personal digital assistants, that is called as PDAs, smartphones, tablet PCs. So these handheld computing systems will be having limited CPU and memory power, and the operating system that is used in handheld systems will be having very limited features, and very limited IO operations will be performed with respect to these handheld systems. Now let us look at the next topic, that is computing environments. So in this, let us study about a traditional computer. So traditional computers like personal computers are used for offices, and nowadays PCs can be connected to network. PCs will be having the NIC, that is network interface card. Using NIC, it is possible to connect the personal computer to the network. Even it can be connected to internet. And if you take a mainframe computer or mini computer, so there will be some common processing unit, and there are multiple users provided with the terminal or workstation. They are working simultaneously, but terminals are attached to the common processing unit. So all the users will be using that processing unit on time sharing basis. It is called as time sharing system also. And also it is possible to have the home networks. So that is the multiple devices can be networked within a home. The next one is the client server computing. In the network or in the internet, you will find the client server systems. So in the network, there are two kinds of systems connected. They are called as host. The one host is called as server host, another host is called as client host. So the server host is a computer system, so that is powerful, which is providing different services to the another kind of host, that is called as client host. So the client host will be requesting some information from the server host. So server is basically having a database which is storing the information, and the clients will be requesting for that particular data. Whatever data present in server, it will be shared among multiple clients. So the main purpose of client server computing is data storage and the communication between the systems. So here the communication begins always from the client. So client will be sending a request to the server for some data, that is client is requesting for some data from the server, and over the network the data will be transferred to the server, and after receiving that request the server is going to map that request onto the some server side program. That server side program is going to have interaction with the database. It is going to interact with the database and it will fetch the required data, and the data will be sent back to the client in the form of response. So client is sending a request to the server is going to handle the client request, and it is providing requested information to the client in the form of response. The server can handle multiple client requests simultaneously. So this is called as client server computing model. The next computing environment is peer-to-peer computing. So this is another distributed system like client server model, but P2P peer-to-peer computing does not contain client and server. Instead of that, all the systems or all the nodes which are present in peer-to-peer computing are called as peers. We don't call them as client and server, they are called as peers. Here each node acts as a client and server or both. So the system which is requesting data is becoming a client. A system or a node which is providing information to the other system is called as a server. So any system in the peer-to-peer computing may act as client and also the server, but they are called as peers. It means so whatever the systems which are present in the network called as peer, they are working collaboratively to perform a particular task. So that is called as peer-to-peer computing. For example, if you take a torrent application, the torrent application is meant for downloading huge files like movie files. So what we can do is a big file can be divided into a number of chunks, and which can be put into different places or peers, and we can download the movie into different chunks from the neighboring peers. And once a particular chunk of data is downloaded into the system, your system may act as a server, and whatever the chunk of data you have already downloaded, it can be transferred to some other peer. So like this, the data will be taken from the multiple sources, and once the data is downloaded, it will be combined to form a single file. So that is what peer-to-peer computing. The next one is open source operating systems. Basically, we'll find two types of operating systems today. One is commercial operating system, and the other one is free operating system. What is commercial operating system? For example, Windows. We should buy a commercial license to use such operating systems. So there is another category, that is the free operating systems like Linux. So they are completely free. The source code of the free operating system is available on the internet. It can be downloaded by anybody, and you can make the modification, and again it will be distributed over the internet. So such systems are called as open source operating systems. So there are some open source licenses like Free Software Foundation, that is the FSF, and GNU Public License, that is called as GPL. So systems like Linux are distributed under GNU public license. The source code of Linux is freely available on the internet, so any developer can download the Linux code and he can make the modifications, and again it can be distributed free of cost over the network. Hence the entire Linux system is free and it is providing open source. So this is the end of introduction to operating system. Thank you.